Yeah, and I think the value piece of it is the best part for me is like if I know I can help one other person, and I've learned through the years that it's not me having to like conjure up an expertise in something and then share that expertise. It's just like sharing my journey, what I've learned, and like that's the best value you can add is like sharing out of seasons you've already been through. It's easy to be like, what can I create? Or like, okay, let me even market research, like looking out and being like, what do I see is missing and how can I'm a person that's like, well, I can figure that out. Like I can do that. And I think I quickly burnt out trying to do things like that because it wasn't me.
Excited to have Miranda at the studio for the Wavelength podcast. This is going to be an awesome episode highlighting moms, highlighting how it is to transition through different phases of your life while still, when you have that ambition, driving and creating digital goods at home, transitioning from working with others to working for and with yourself. This is going to be an awesome story. Let's jump in. Miranda, what's going on? So fun to have you here. This is cool because we met through a close friend of ours, Drew Neal, through church. How many years ago? 6, 7?
I feel like
8,
7 or
years
8.
Like it's a lot of years ago, and our life has changed so much.
So much.
You got married. Well, how many years have you been married?
We'll be 8 years this year. Yep.
I thought that I met you before you got married.
Yeah, we had a pretty short process. We like started dating, got engaged and married within like 6 months. So somewhere in there in that year.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, tell us a little bit of that story because now you have kids.
Yes.
I think there's really cool stuff we can talk about your transition. So talk about before the transition. We'll bring everybody up to speed with your life. But like, what were you doing before you like, and I think even like the degree, what you got your degree in, how you evolved through all these different phases.
Yeah. So I graduated college with like an elementary education degree. And I also had a bunch of majors and minors. Just I loved school and loved learning. And so I dove right in and I had a lot of like leadership administration pieces of my degree as well, because I knew I didn't want to go into teaching. So just the whole politics of the teaching world was not for me.
You got your degree in teaching, but you knew you didn't want to go into teaching.
Yeah. And so I was like, what else can I gain from here while I'm here? And what am I going to do after that? And so I graduated college and then met my husband. We started dating and then I met Drew through my husband. And so he was an amazing mentor of mine, like for the last almost 10 years. And he was like, why don't you come do some admin work for me? And just being under somebody that is in the business world is doing so many different things. And him and I are so similar. I learned so much. And so the relationship just stuck and I continued to do things in some capacity for him over the years until I like worked full time with him. And again, still knowing I didn't want to do education, but somewhere I felt like that would weave into my story a little bit.
It's totally weaved into your story.
Now it is. Yeah. Now it's like coming to light. And so, yeah, in my whole 20s, I'm turning 30 this year. So in all of my 20s, I worked, got married, we had 2 kids, and I just moved this last year to stay at home. And so it's been an interesting track of growing and being mentored and just kind of surrendering to the learning process in my 20s and knowing that like, okay, in my 30s, I feel like I'm going to dive into what's for me and what I'm going to run. So
it's so cool that we have this mutual feeling about Drew, and I think everybody does.
Yeah.
It's one thing to have someone who's competent, who has high character, but then he also has a willingness to like give, teach, empower.
Yeah.
And he's a great leader. So I think like I've learned an insane amount, traveled the world with him and just soaked him up as a person, absorbed him. And you just walk away feeling amazing about it. And he always, it's all permission based for him as well too.
Yeah.
So,
he's so empowering. And I think a lot of the qualities I learned being under him transfer even to like how I lead my home and manage my home. I feel like he had such a perspective that everyone has value. And I worked in other jobs before him and obviously had come in contact with other business owners. And not every person who leads companies or leads teams has that viewpoint that people are valuable and that everyone has an equally important role on a team. And there's just such a hierarchy in the business space that's like can be, I think, really detrimental to people and their own value on themselves. And so he was very empowering and very willing to learn. I think that was honestly my favorite characteristic that I gleaned from him was just being open to learning. Like you can be confident about what you know. He used to say this, being confident about what you know, but open-handed about what you don't know. And so it's like,
confident about what you know, open-handed about what you don't know.
Yeah. So like, how can I be confident about what I know
Drew
and
Neal
run
one-liners.
forward? I know. There's so many. But
well, all right, let's drop. Do you have any more that you could drop?
Oh my gosh.
We're gonna tag them.
I can't pull them.
The classic.
They'll come out as I think
Okay,
of them.
okay.
I'll drop them.
But then, like, some of the work you were doing for the clients were what? Like, you were doing
Yeah.
marketing
I
because you learned
started-
creative as well. Talk
I
a little
did.
bit about
I started
that.
as an EA for him. So I was super administrative. And honestly, any of the jobs I had before him or even that I worked alongside of him, I was always going in and like helping fix things that were misaligned or were a mess or chaotic. And so I jumped around a lot. And it looked from the outside like I was just jumping jobs. But I worked for a lawyer as a paralegal for a while and like dove into the legal space. I learned so many things. And so when he was like, hey, just come do admin for me, I think I was booking travel in the beginning as he was traveling and speaking, and learned a lot under him, and then started just doing more and more and taking more responsibility. And so as I grew with him as an executive admin, I also took on a lot of like operations roles for some of the companies he started. So what started as more of him in the nonprofit space moved to him consulting for nonprofits and then taking on business contracts and doing more like marketing, branding, finance campaigns for
Did you deal with the
other
contracts
companies. Yeah. So having my experience in legal,
So cool.
he would hand me contracts and I'd sift through them and be like, this is the things we're pulling out, or this is the stuff that we're, concerned about or whatever. So I just had such a
And why should be, and once you go
hodgepodge.
into the legal, then it's like, why should we be concerned about there? Where are the risks?
Yeah. So it was fun, and I'm always willing to learn too, like really similar in that way. And so if I didn't know something, one of us would figure it out, and we were a pretty like nimble team. Even when we had contract employees or other employees come on, we still just like shifted and moved a lot.
You did
and
some of the
I learned
interview
a lot of things.
processes.
Yeah.
I think I want to get into the creative, like how you got into like
Yeah.
learning that, because that's like you've jumped around so much. You did operation leadership, you did management,
Yeah.
hiring, you did like the delivery, all the stuff, right?
Yeah.
Your client interactions, sales. I would love to know if you got into the sales as well. Like,
Yeah, a little bit. Mhm.
Okay, cool. But it's like, I think at the end of the day, one of the nuggets in your story starting to make more sense. It's
Yeah.
like the reason you got along with Drew so well is entrepreneurs get along with entrepreneurs
Mhm.
and winners get along with winners. And I
Mhm.
think that your natural state of where you're going is where you're at.
Yeah.
You're an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Like it's so deep into your blood.
Yeah.
Like just hearing the way you talk, it's so exciting to know that. Like I also think it's special that you're in your 20s now,
Yeah.
right? Like you've closed out a season. Like what's
Yeah.
30s going to look like? It's going to be
I know.
amazing for you
It's
because
wild.
now you're kind of like spreading your wings and flying, and you're going to do your thing, and
Yeah.
you've learned all these great skills. And that doesn't mean you're going to fail a lot
Yes.
more,
Yeah.
but you have all
That's
this
part of it.
amazing foundational
Mhm.
knowledge and experience of how to pull the value all the way through.
Yeah.
So I just want to highlight those pieces, but talk to me about the creative though. So when did you get into that? Because I
Yeah.
think that's a very powerful tool for entrepreneurs, especially if you're getting into building digital goods,
Yes.
to not need to outsource the creative side if you don't have to.
Yeah. I think at a core for myself, this is going to sound really simple and strange, but like I like pretty things. Like I always have had an eye for what I think looks good or aesthetic, and like can appreciate even other aesthetics that aren't my favorite, but I'm like, oh, that's a vibe. Like that looks
Mhm.
good. And so I've always enjoyed that piece of it. And when at one point and working for Drew, like part-time, my husband and I started a web design company. So my husband's in IT. So he kind of had that background and taught me a ton about coding. And I'd done some of that in school, but he's like, here's how it works. And whatever, this is how you build them. And I'm like, cool, but can we make it look pretty? Cause he's like real functional. And I'm
I would
like,
love to
we
watch you and Jeff
we
interact.
can't have blue and gray like on everything. We need like some colors and flowers here. So I came in and did a lot of the design.
I love
side of
blue
it.
and gray. I'm just kidding.
As long as it is cohesive and looks good.
Throw a
So
flower in there.
he's just like typical IT. And he also actually has a really good eye for what looks good. We have two very different tastes. He's like modern industrial. I think he would have
Mhm.
like black glass table furniture in our house if he could. And I'm just more like homey and warm and want like wood tones. But so I always loved that piece and got into designing and building websites. And actually one of the things in the beginning that frustrated me was I was taking web design jobs and these people had no value for aesthetic. And so in the beginning I was just building their vision.
Which is the whole purpose of having
and
a
I'd
website.
walk away and I'd be like, it looks terrible. Like I don't want to.
Or you're trying to
promote
give
this.
them a cost that they don't understand why it costs that way because they
Yeah.
want something so bare bones, and you're like, well, I don't do
And
work
I'd be like,
that.
send me 5 websites you like and tell me in your words why you like them, because it's communication. Like they don't know, the pieces. And they'd be like, well, I like that it looks and feels warm and cozy, or whatever it is, the words that they would use. And I'm like, okay, so you like the brand and the palette that's here and the elements that are represented throughout it. And so I was even
That's
still
cool.
on my
So
journey.
you're learning that you're teaching them
Yes.
the value right,
Yeah.
of what you were doing before you did it.
Yeah,
It's
and
great.
explaining that like, okay, this is a lot. They wouldn't get branding packages with their websites, and I had to explain like, well, why their website didn't feel like they wanted it to feel is because of all these
Right.
other
Half the
elements.
time you took on a client, basically what I'm hearing you say
Yeah.
is you looked at their brand and you're like,
Yeah.
it's like
Or I'd
a,
be like, "Do you have a brand?" And they're like, "I have a logo
but the
that someone
logo's
made." And
potentially
I'm like,
outdated and
yeah.
not friendly, not
I'm like, "That's
interactive
also
with
one piece of your whole
the
brand."
industry and the brand, the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
Very cool.
So, and I was
But
still
then you
learning
learned
on my own. So I'm
on
with
your own,
Drew.
like the photo, all that, right?
Yeah.
Illustrator.
So a lot of it was like I knew what I liked and what I thought looked good, but I still had to learn like the philosophy behind it all. And that's where Drew came in a lot. Is he also had a very similar track, but he's, however many years ahead of me. And so
But the
he
philosophy, but then did you actually learn how to do it?
yeah, he
The
had a
cre-
lot of experience in Illustrator, and so I think I learned Illustrator from him and watched him build brand packages for one of our clients. We had to do that for other people, and he built a lot of his own brands. I feel like out of all the companies that we ran, he had one that he hired out the branding process for, and I don't know how much he like knew ahead of time or how much he gleaned from this person, but after that he built them all himself. And so I got to stand by as we built I think 4 company brand packages together, and then we did it for other clients, and we brought in like graphic designers, and I got to see the whole process a little bit more and how there's multiple pillars of brand, and it's not just the visual side, it's really like the feeling and emotion. And I felt
Mhm.
like it put a lot of depth behind what I felt when I was building sites of like, oh, you want it to feel people want to feel welcomed when they come to your site, or you want them to feel educated when they come to your site, and that's all part of the brand piece of it.
Mhm.
And so yeah, I just got some like legs under what I already felt like I knew and some depth behind like how the creative side of it worked. And now it's fun because as I build digital resources and things like that, I have such a background in like this is what the brand is, or this is how I want people to feel walking away from this, and how to authentically show up as myself and my own brand and still help people have a good experience. So
Very cool. And then you
yeah.
got pregnant.
Then I got pregnant. Isn't that the way it goes?
Is that a
So
wake up call with all the
the first our first child, we have two. The first child, we actually had like quite a journey with pregnancy. I had miscarriages before we got pregnant with the first. So we were trying for a while and trying to figure out what family growth looked like, dealing with health things and all that stuff. And then I got pregnant. We were very excited with my first. And so I took the normal 2-month maternity leave. Like, the job and all the things were so understanding. We were growing our family. We were really excited, had our first son, and I went back to work after a few months, and we ended up moving into like me going full time, and we got a nanny. And so we tried
So did
like
you like that little gap, or were you going stir crazy a little bit?
I think at 3 weeks postpartum, I texted her and was like, "Give me something to do." I was like, "We have one baby. I'm
You can only
not."
tidy up so much. I
Yeah,
like to tidy up,
exactly.
and then I'm always just like, all right, what am
I'm like, okay, he like sleeps all day. He was like a really easy baby. And so
Awesome.
honestly, Jeff worked from home with him for months. Like we had family help, but we didn't have anyone to help for the first 8 months of his life. And so we just worked it out. Like the days I worked, one of our family would come or Jeff would come. Our baby was so simple. So at
That's
4 weeks old,
amazing.
I was like, I need a project. Like I need something to do. Like
Not
give me something to
all
work
like
on.
everybody. There's like categories of types of people. I have like 2 big categories for women.
Yeah.
Like one category is like the very driven. I want to do something.
Mhm.
I want to be a stay-at-home mom. I want to have a family. I want to have kids.
Yeah.
Right. There's obviously a category that's not in that, but it's like at the same time, there's just you're very driven.
Yeah.
You're in this category.
Yeah.
And then there's others that are like, they just want to be a stay-at-home mom. They
Mhm.
don't have that drive as much. It's not a
Yeah.
bad thing. It's just they don't have that
It's
drive as
different.
much. It's
Mhm.
different. And it's very cool. Like when I get to interview and interact with people like you, because
Yeah.
your brain is just like, again, you're
All the
so
things,
entrepreneurial.
yeah.
You want to create, you want to
Yeah.
produce, you want to be building value, you want to be learning.
Yes.
It's very, very
Yeah.
exhausting to be in that brain,
It is.
right? Because it's,
Yeah.
like I have that brain as well, but it's it's so rewarding.
Yeah, and I think the value piece of it is the best part for me is like if I know I can help one other person, and
Mhm.
I've learned through the years that it's not me having to like conjure up an expertise in something and then share that expertise. It's just like sharing my journey and what I've learned, and like that's the best value you can add is like sharing out of seasons you've already been through. And
That's
so
really cool. Like
being
your
able
authentic
to
self,
yeah.
not trying to conjure up some product or
Yeah.
skill. That's not easy for someone who doesn't know what to do and they're working a job and they want to make
Yeah.
$2,000 more a year, $5,000 more
Yeah.
a year, $10,000 more a year. Like, what do they sell? What do they do?
Yeah, it's easy to be like, what can I create? Or like, okay, let me even market research, like looking out and being like, what do I see is missing? And how can I'm a person that's like, well, I can figure that out. Like I can do that. And I think I quickly burnt out trying to do things like that because it wasn't me. And so
I
I
just
had
asked
to,
someone the other day, I'm like, do you believe we were talking about our company, and one of the questions I always ask when there may or may not be a transition with someone is, do you believe in this company?
Mm-hmm.
Well, and then if someone, and they were talking a little bit about like, well, the market research, and I see this as a great opportunity. And I'm like, I didn't ask you if the market research
Yeah.
was
You didn't
something
ask
that
if it's
this
a
is a
viable
viable
company.
product
Yeah.
and a viable product and a
Yeah.
viable, I was like, I asked you, do you believe in the company? I had asked 4 times and finally got to the point where like, well, I don't know. I
Yeah.
was like, good, great,
Yeah.
good answer.
Yeah.
But it's really hard to build something, be passionate about something. To your point, even if you have that entrepreneurial drive, but you're starting your foot on something that you don't love, it's
Yeah.
really hard to stay consistent in that.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of people actually lose passion.
I think it's a balance of like energy, because if I'm taking all of my energy, let's say I'm giving a piece to my family, whatever, a piece to our extended family, a piece to all the things to manage in my home, and then I have this energy left and I have to give it to something. If I'm pouring it all out into something that I'm not then filled back up by, then I'm being drained. And it's like an off-weighted
Well, yeah.
energy transfer versus like, oh, I'm going to pour into this and it's so much work. Like, it's so much work to be an entrepreneur and to continue to move forward into path like growth and what that looks like and where I want to go and what I want to create next. But if I'm being filled up by it and it's also rewarding to me, then it's less of an energy output and the exchange is a little bit more even and it makes it sustainable.
It's a litmus test for anyone. And I think if you break it down for kids, like family is like kids and husband for you, right?
Yes.
It's like
Yeah.
you pour into your kids, definitely an energy return. It's one of the best, right?
Yeah.
You pour in your
It's
husband.
also a big energy bowl, but
100, it's a massive
yes.
one.
The emotional
The
reward
biggest
side.
one, and tiring, and
Yeah.
but you're in the youngest age. There's
Oh my
car
gosh.
seats, and there's like
Oh my
nobody knows
gosh.
how to do
Yeah.
anything. They don't put their shoes on.
Yeah, exactly.
You pour in your husband. Hopefully, some of that comes back. Sometimes it
Yeah,
comes back at a 3x, a 10x. Sometimes
yeah.
it's a -2.
Yeah.
But like a spouse, awesome
Balance,
person
yeah.
to bounce the energy through.
Mhm.
With the business, anyone that wants to do an idea, that's a great thing. Well, I don't know what to do. Well, do what you think you know what you do and see if
Yes.
the energy comes back.
I honestly found talking to friends who are like, I want to create a digital product or start a business and I don't know what to do. I'm like, well, number one, what did you need a few years ago? Like, go down that whole path of like, what expertise do you have and how can you pour out? But also, what do you enjoy and what's going to feel easy? And I feel like the most times that I've seen success through friends doing things, it's when they say, like, they feel unqualified to do that thing. And I'm like, I think you're on the right path if you feel unqualified, because you're like, I have a friend right now who's creating a whole homeschooling guide to help parents decide if they want to homeschool. And she's giving them like
That is
litmus tests for
awesome.
like, think about your expectations and think about your types of kids. And here's the 6 types of homeschooling you can do, because there's so many.
There's so many.
And she's creating it every day. She's like,
That's
I
really
don't feel
special,
qualified.
actually.
I can't, like, I just figured this out by Googling. Like, I'm like, that means you're on the right path. Like, I need your guide, first of all, because we're going to go on a homeschooling journey soon. But I'm like, that's how it is. If you figured it out and bootstrapped it, and now you can put it all in a guide for another mom to help her so she doesn't have to do that. She has like links to all the legal
accelerating all the decision making paths, all the
gosh.
information, all the knowledge, right? That's
Exactly.
awesome.
So I'm like, I think if the moment you feel like I can't do this, there's almost a personal identity attachment to the thing you want to create. And I think that's the path you should run down.
Oh, I like that a lot. And I always feel like you get there's a little saying I always went by, right? You get called for what you're not qualified for.
Yeah.
Right? Like your calling on your life is what you feel you maybe don't feel qualified for. And there's so many incredible stories of that. But I think for digital creators, what I love about what you just highlighted too is everybody has it's knowledge and information. Most of digital goods are either talent driven, music, right? Entertainment, short films, whatever, or it's knowledge driven. It's e-courses. It's having an expertise in something. And then that drives into the community piece, because it adds so much value having a niche community of people that you have an expertise in, and you can share that knowledge and help them grow the thing that they're doing. So I think that leads into your book writing.
Yes.
Because you wrote a book on identity.
Yeah.
You just brought that up. I've had it come up a few times while you were talking.
Yeah.
And did that kind of come out of all of this to where you wanted to solidify your thoughts on, like, you talk about the books and talk about why?
Okay. So there's been a few book type resources I've put out. I wrote and published with a publishing house back before I had kids. And a lot of that came out of like, I was going through such a journey on healing, coming out of like, you spend how many years under your parents and you're like in their house. And then we were just joking that like we all feel 17 sometimes. Like we still are like, how in the world do we manage people and like run companies and have families? But coming out of that season and learning like, okay, who am I? Like, what is it that I want to do and what's my core identity. Like I think everyone, regardless of background, has to have like a solid place to start before they can move forward and add value to anybody else, or else you're swayed by the wind. And so a lot of my book was how to manage voices of people speaking to you and recognizing that there might be 10 knobs of voices that you have at full volume and you need to like shut some of them down.
Wow, that's
And
great.
so transitioning into your 20s, I was early 20s when I wrote my book. Yeah, I think I was like 24. And being able to turn those volume knobs down and manage like solidifying your identity, and then how your identity impacts the relationships around you and how to have healthy relationships, healthy communication,
Ooh, I like that.
like
Yeah.
communicate the transition you're kind of making into adulthood. And so I shared a lot of that, and there's so much value in that book. It was like such a fun project. I
What's it
partnered with the
called?
publishing house, Be You Beloved. And I partnered with a publishing house and put that out, and it was like a dream come true. And then I was in my early 20s, so I was like, what's the next thing? Like, let's keep moving. And so I kept going, and now I'm in a season where I just want to create. Like, I'm feeling that pull, and so I know I'll write more books, but
Gosh, I love that.
it's so fun. It's
It
just like,
is.
how can I get something into someone's hands? And I think digital products are so fun because, especially as now I'm making community with so many moms, like the venture of, it seems so simple and like I probably overanalyze it, but you have to like go out to a store and buy a product and get it home and figure out how to integrate it. It's just like so many hurdles when your life's
That's for the
already
buyer.
chaotic.
For the
Like,
seller, you have to like figure
oh my
out
gosh.
fulfillment, and you have to figure out physical
I was talking to
printing, and you have to
someone
figure out the
in my
margin.
networking community the other day about wholesaling. She makes products and she wants to wholesale. And I'm like, that's just like a world I don't know that I ever want to get into, but kudos to you. Like, go for it if it's your journey. So digital products are fun because I feel like it's an easily accessible and cheaper. Like I can sell things for so much cheaper because I'm making profit on all of it. Like once
Yeah.
I create it and put that energy and effort in, I'm getting the return from the whole product versus like minus the print cost, minus the
The
whatever
margins
distribution, minus the
the margins are just crazy.
yeah. So and someone can purchase it, download it immediately. I just launched
Oh
a
yeah, experience
planner
it.
for moms this last week, and like within minutes we have feedback on it. Like someone buys it and then they email us and they're like, I cannot wait to get started on this, or I can't wait to use this, or I've been using it for a week now and this
What
is
is it
how it's
now? Talk a
working.
little bit about that.
So me and a friend partnered together. She's a homeschool mom and she couldn't find a planner that supported homeschooling multiple kids. And I'm not in that stage yet, but she came to me and was like,
Like
I
a
need
first
some
grader
more.
and a third grader, and how do you
Yeah.
balance
So
the
she's
day?
like, a lot
And
of them are one kid tracks. So you put their curriculum and their homework in, and depending on the state you're in, the regulation is different. So sometimes you have to report everything your child does
yeah,
every day, or you
right.
have to show attendance. And
So
like,
hardcore.
we live in a state that we don't have to do any of that. So I wasn't
Mhm.
even thinking of like the tracking things, but she's like, I have this need to be able to track all my kids when I'm doing homeschooling, and I cannot find a planner that supports it. But she's like, I don't know anything about the design side of it or selling it. Can you help me? And she's like, and would you be open to maybe partnering on it? And so a lot of the energy I've put into my platform over the last year has been like routines and rhythms for moms to help them create like a home they feel like they can flow in easily and thrive in, and that's like full of peace and joy, and it's not stressful and overwhelming. And so I was like, yes, I'll put energy in and partner with you, but can we like collaborate on this a little bit and make this like a home base for moms to track those routines and rhythms, as well as have it function for homeschool in the way that you want it? And so she was all in
It's
on
all
it.
about structure, isn't it?
Yeah.
You
So
got to have the right
we
structure for
dove in
this.
and created this like amazing ideal product that both of us want, which honestly is like the best
How
thing
long
to
did it take you
create.
to build?
We built it in 4 weeks. And
Wow.
so it's like a 200-page planner, and we decided to do it as digital for now. We're talking about print, but it's just like the hurdles for all that is
It's
wild.
just
So instead of looking
keep
into
it
print,
digital.
yeah, instead of looking into print, we created a printable version where people can like PDF print
Exactly.
it.
Yeah.
And I created a digital version where like iPad can click through and it's a different version. So
Cool.
I was like, I'll put the energy into that and we'll sell digital and
hmm
printable, and like moms can use that. But then they can buy it and like print it right away
But
or
it just
print it how
shows
they
you
want it.
you went 4 weeks in on that deal.
Yeah.
And that's like short. Like that's pretty
So
amazing
short.
because
Yeah.
you're also doing all the design work internally yourself.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
I
we did it all.
what I love about this part too is I'd like to extrapolate some of the knowledge on like
Yeah.
I'm a verbal processor when I go through them, like my structure strategy when and that's a daily thing when you're building stuff.
Yeah.
So how do you find out if what you think you want to build is something other people want? Do you do focus groups? Is your version of a focus group, you call a bunch of your friends and you say, hey, I'm thinking about this thing. Would you ever
Yeah.
buy this? How do you like figure out first if someone would want to buy it?
Yeah. I think because I only focus in like the category of what feels authentic to me right now. So I went through that whole season of like, I'm going to find a gap and I'm going to fill it. And that's going to be like my business model. And it was just unsustainable, like we talked about. So now I start by asking, would I want it? Like at some point in my life or my journey, would I want it? Do I want it right now? Is that why I'm creating it? And will that be enough of a reward if I just create something that I want? Or is it something I wanted 5 years ago and I wish I had, like that homeschool guide my friend's making? And so I start by seeing how aligned it is with me. And if it kind of passes that test, then I move on. My Instagram community, I've just like curated this little community of moms, and they're all amazing and so sweet and friendly. And I ask them. And so I'll be
That's what's
like,
so
hey,
cool. You
I'm
could be like, hey, I'm
thinking,
going to be building this.
literally, like, I'm thinking about building this thing. Like, would that serve you? Would you like this? What questions would you have about it? What would you guys want in it? Like question boxes and polls and all the stuff on stories. And so that's like a huge piece. And then I do have some sets of like group text messages or
Close
Instagram
people
messages, yeah, that I'll send to too.
or past customer, like people that have
Yeah,
past purchased your stuff.
exactly. And so, and just like get a feeler for like, what do you need right now? Like, what part of, even if it's like something as simple as like, hey, I was thinking about this and this part of stepping into homeschooling feels hard to me. What part feels hard to you? And it's just like community. Like, they're like, oh, we're having a conversation about our difficulties. And I'm like, data. Like, I'm
Hmm.
taking all this data and I'm going to create things for you. So,
The pain
it's
points.
fun. Yeah, exactly. Then you have to have a value to like, learn and grow and flow and figure it out because you don't have $2,000 to put into it. So what can you do yourself? Like a lot of my journey as an entrepreneur, I've just learned things. Like we
Hmm.
needed websites, or I worked at a company and they needed a website edits done, and they're like, can you do that? And I was like, yup. And I'd never touched a website before, and I was like, I got it. And so
Brutal,
I sat down and I was like, YouTube, like,
but
how do
so
I edit this
rewarding.
website?
That's right.
Because I can figure anything out. Like I believe that about myself. And so, and it's served me so well because in I see now where I want to put dollars to do things for me. And I know that I can figure other things out where I don't have to put dollars towards those things or hiring out services. But then I see the value of like, as I grow, I can't manage it all by myself. So I need a VA or
Some
I need
tools.
a
Yeah, yeah.
finance person to help manage or whatever, because I can do it all myself, but it's not always beneficial to do it
Hmm.
all yourself either. So,
So who are your core audience, and then talk about where they can find the resources so they can find them on your website. Then it sounds like
yes, yeah.
99% of them or all of them.
Yeah, so I have a couple worlds here. So I have the mom community. That's really just like my fun, like passion outlet to serve them and to have community because as a mom, I needed community. And so
Hmm.
I just built it. And I was like, I just want a space where I feel like we can come and just connect and things are hard, but we can be okay and move forward, not like they're hard and we're just gonna sit in the suck, you know?
Hmm.
So I built this Instagram community and that's like a lot of where I hang out, and that's Thriving Home Co. That's just where I want to pour resources into helping moms and their homes
Thriving Home
thrive.
Co.
Thriving Home Co. So thrivinghomeco.com has all the resources for home stuff. So there's routines and rhythms workbooks, there's guides to there's like some free printables for like weekly schedules for your kids, there's the planner, like there's so much stuff on there. And then the web design branding company, like really where I work with like small business entrepreneurs, I want to provide services for them in the branding, design, creative side that are affordable, but that will kind of take them to the next level in the brand that they're wanting to build. And
Very
so
cool.
there's a lot of digital resource things there for them and services at Thriving Creatives Co. So
Thriving Creatives Co.
yeah.
Cool. And then do you have a website as well that's personal?
Yeah. No, just Thriving Home Co, Thriving Creatives Co are the
Very
two that I
cool.
pour into. Yeah.
I like that. I think that you also we talked a little bit before. You're going to get into some really cool stuff though with
Yeah.
homeschooling,
Yes.
and there's so many. I mean, that was the past life for me, and
Yeah.
not homeschooling, but specifically schools and
Yeah.
school resources and curriculum. That is a really fun journey.
Yeah.
But how many digital products do you think you've created up until now?
Less than 10, I would say. But overall, I've probably poured into a couple hundred, like really just put energy into a couple
It just
hundred.
shows you, but I'm just saying, like, you're trying
Yes.
to curate now the best stuff and only offer
Yes.
out the best. So you've got
Exactly.
to create 100, and it's like you can't look at that as failure. You got to look at that as
No.
part of the iterative
And some of them
process.
I made it and then I made a different version, different version, different version. It morphed into what's out there now, but I've made, 10 just to get to that one. So
Cool.
yeah, I think my like heart and passion really is to see families feel connected and like they can thrive. I think um being in the business world and like seeing team dynamics in that sense, like you have a CEO and they're over this team and you're all working towards the common goal. When I moved to stay at home last year, I saw so many parallels between the two spaces. Like I spent,
Hmm.
almost a decade in business observing how that all worked, and then moving into my home, it felt like pure chaos for a while. Like I
Hmm.
just had a baby when I moved to come home. So I have a newborn and then I had a 2.5-year-old. And so it's just like a whirlwind of kids and bottles and feeding and diapers and like all the stuff. And I remember Jeff and I sitting down and we're like, we have to have like a philosophy for how we're going to run our family because we want a lot of kids. And so we're like, we got to figure this out now before I joke I want 11. Like my heart's to have 11 kids.
That would be
And so
awesome.
I'm one
You
of
got to do
6
that.
kids. So I grew
I
up in a
had
big
3 and I
family.
want more. But
Yeah. I'm
that
like, let's just
season's
keep
passed for
going. Like,
us.
just
Yeah.
keep going. But, so who knows how many kids we'll have, but I'm like, I want this to feel intentional. And I think I've seen and worked with families. I worked in kids ministry at churches for a really long time too. And I just had an inside glimpse to family dynamics and how they worked, not just my own upbringing, but like these other families. And I think watching families feel connected and empower each other was so rewarding to me. And so being in a business space and working with Drew, he's such an empowering leader. Like we had team meetings and it was like, what are you working on? And here's the value that you add to our team. And we're all working towards a common goal, but every single role has so much weight on it of what we're all working
And
towards.
intention. Yeah.
Yeah. And I loved like being in that environment and feeling empowered in that way, but knowing that there also was like clear expectations and roles that everybody had. And I'd come from companies where it was just like chaotic and everyone did everything or the owner didn't communicate a lot or whatever it
So
was.
many parallels to family, right?
Yeah. So then moving into family, I'm like, we have to have, I'm administrative at heart. So I'm like, we have to have a system. We have to have administration. We have to have clear communication. Like our kids need to like understand. And so we've actually morphed a lot into communicating to our kids that like we are a team and we all work together. And this isn't a hierarchy model. We just have different roles. Like my job is to help guide you and to keep you safe, little kids, because you'll run into the street and you don't
Mhm.
understand why. And so I'm helping set boundaries. But your job is to like have fun and be a kid and to I don't know, engage and build relationship with us and play and help keep our home nice. And I've
Mhm.
kind of moved away, even as we move with my 3.5-year-old into like chore stage. I moved away from having chores and I'm like, we're a team and we all take care of our house. So what part of our house are you going to help take care of today? And it's super fun. We're diving into like money and him earning money and like what that all looks like. But I think I saw so many parallels from business to home of how do I want my team dynamic to flow with my kids? And I want them to feel empowered. Like
So
Jeff and
cool.
I as a couple are just empowering people. And I feel like we both in each other, I think every couple kind of has like an identity as a couple. Like you have your own things that you carry and release. And then as a couple, you release something together unique. And Jeff and I are very like empowering and peace releasers. And so in our home, we want that experience. We want you to feel empowered and we want you to feel peace when you're in our house. And so we transfer that culture. Like we have a, probably a team culture, business culture in our family as well.
Share, some closing thoughts on if people, want to contact you, if they want
Yeah.
to connect with you, what they can do to do that, and like what type of relationship, also like what fills you up in those connections when they're reaching out to you.
Yeah. I think as in the mom family side, it can be so isolating and lonely sometimes. Like, but I think we do it to ourselves a little bit because you stay at home with your kids and you shut your door and you have your rhythms and routines and that's all that you do. And opening up to going to like in person mom groups can be really stressful. And I'm terrible at meeting new people. I feel like I'm like small talk is not my thing. I'm like, just want to dive in. I'm like, what was your trauma like? Like, what's your childhood? And so it's just not my experience. I don't love that. But online's so much easier. And I feel like there's ways to see people's pages and connect and like, oh, you have this kid or you do this, or people post their stories and you're like, oh, I went there last week. Like, how was it? And so as a mom, just connection and community, I would love that on Instagram. And then obviously the resources I put out there are intended to help moms thrive. And so on the business side, I find so much joy in helping people really like perfect and hone in the vision of what they want to create and creatively express that. So web design, branding, I have a networking community there as well so that people can connect with other creatives
Very
and
cool.
walk the journey out. And so Thriving Home Co, Thriving Creatives Co, my Instagram's just Miranda Trudeau at Miranda Trudeau. But yeah, it's so fun.
Awesome to be with you.
Yeah,
Super
this
fun.
was so fun to catch up.
It was great. I'm really, really excited for your next decade.
Yeah.
And I'm going to check out some of these digital products because I think that I'd love to experience the full flow of
Yeah.
your system as well.
Yeah.
So, well, you just listened to Miranda and our conversation on the wavelength. I hope you enjoyed it and go check out her digital goods.